And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. In 2005, the Workers' Compensation Board became known as WorkSafe BC. The new name more accurately reflects their focus on prevention, customer service, and return to work. While Workers' Compensation Board remains their legal name, WorkSafe BC is a name used on a daily basis. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 2000.
The slope is steep, the ground wet, and the trees huge. The risks here are numerous, but falling trees is a job people do safely every day in the Northwest. Sometimes it's a matter of experience and care, but other times just a matter of luck. For too many forest workers, luck runs out, however. In the Northwest between January and October this year, 5 fallers and a hook tender were killed on the job.
In all of the situations, awareness of their work environment was a critical factor. It was a contributing cause, or lack of awareness. And all of those cases, that lack of awareness is directly related to the quality of training which they had gotten. In 2 of the specific fatal accidents we had, training was the primary contributing factor. The workers just had not been trained to deal with the circumstances and the type of work that they had been asked to do.
Many of the investigations we get into really key back to the fact that there's a lack of training. Somebody's either gone from one job to another and picked up things through the School of Hard Knocks, or because of financial pressures, work pressures, they've been moved to another occupation for that particular day. And that's really what happens. We also have the human trait of the fact that if you've done it for 10 years and you haven't got hurt, and maybe you've taken some shortcuts, that you continue to take shortcuts.
Over 1,600 workers were also injured in the logging industry across the province between January and September this year. Some were so badly hurt they may not work again. To reduce the toll, the WCB and the Northwest and Central Interior Loggers Associations have formed a new agency to improve training. The BC Logging Health and Safety Agency wants to make access to training easier and to standardize and boost the quality of training.
Right now, what we've concentrated on is in the preparing employers for the change in regulations so that they're aware of what they have to do to be in compliance. And what the future holds, I think, would be development of specific courses to help them be in compliance. One area that we're currently looking at a little bit is supervisor. The role of the supervisor is definitely going to change under the regulations. He's going to have some skills to determine that the people he has working for them are performing their work in a safe manner and that they actually know what they're doing. And if they don't have a background in that particular job themselves, how do they determine that?
The WCB's Dave Rowe also sees some specific training needs in the Northwest.
I think the key thing for the Northwest loggers and this particular sector is where the focuses will be on cable harvesting. Predominantly in this part of the province you have some steep locations, somewhat decadent timber, and as a result of that there needs to be a real focus on the processes you work with, both with hand falling and cable yarding.
Learning how to operate equipment properly is a big factor for safety and efficiency, but many employers balk at the cost involved.
That's difficult. The way it's been in the past is that you have an employee with you sometime and you give them an opportunity to break in on a piece of equipment. We have been fortunate that we've had some highly skilled people. Of course, those people are aging, and as they're leaving, that is one of the areas where we're finding there is a lack of qualified people that are good operators. This equipment is very expensive, and employers are reluctant to give people time on that equipment. That's basically dead time for them. They need the productive time in order to, it has to provide an income. It can cost in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $1 million for some of this equipment, so it's a big capital expenditure.
One method that may help with training on equipment is simulators. Nestor's excited about that possibility. He notes transmission and engine simulators are now available for training truck drivers. Whatever kind of training's involved, Logging contractors are hoping the involvement of the new agency will reduce their own financial risks when investing in employees.
What's happened in the past is a contractor has spent a lot of money training an employee, and if that contractor is out in camp or something like that, and all of a sudden a local contractor in town requires that sort of employee, he will hire him, and the employee of course wants to come to town as opposed to staying in camp. So the contractor spent a lot of money training an employee, and then all of a sudden a few months later, maybe a year later, lost him. This way, if the funding comes from the agency, the contractor won't be out of pocket if the employee chooses to change jobs.
The agency also wants to set up a registry to keep track of what courses individual workers have completed. The contractors like that idea too.
That too will allow the contractor to find out what the employee has for training, how much training, how many years of experience, and on what type of equipment. It's very expensive to train an employee, and it's also very costly to hire an employee who you think is trained and you find out later that he's not.
Labor isn't a partner in this agency. Most contractors in the interior aren't unionized. But the IWA is involved in talks with the WCB and others about creating a larger organization to deal with health and safety in the forest industry throughout BC. IWA officials support the idea of standardized training developed through the WCB and see a registry as very positive. But training itself isn't everything. Enforcement is also critical, and attitude. Those involved with this new agency want logging to be seen more as a profession.
I totally agree with Dave's perspective that injuries and deaths in the bush are unacceptable. We've got to work harder to alleviate them. And it can't be something that you can just go out of school and jump in the bush and, by gosh or by golly, yes, today I've come home, tomorrow I might not.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Starting with a sawmill in Winock, British Columbia, Interfor was founded in 1963 under the name Yorkston Lumber Company. In 1988, after becoming public and acquiring a dozen more companies, the company changed its name to International Forest Products Limited. Let us return to the archives with Les Pavlak.
Chameleon Creek lies about 50 kilometers south of Prince Rupert at the top of Grenville Channel. Currently, the timber license in the area is held by International Forest Products Limited. Chameleon is a salmon-bearing stream, and in fact, an average of 20,000 pink salmon return to it on a yearly basis, along with a mixture of coho. In 1996, Interfor, in cooperation with Forest Renewal BC, performed an inventory of the watersheds in the areas where it logs and identified which ones needed habitat restoration.
Interfor wants to be involved in improvement of the habitat. Interfor wants to be involved in general forestry, not only logging, but also the other aspects, other resources of forestry. And one of these resources is fish habitat. And we would like to help as much as we can to improve this habitat, which was destroyed or damaged in the past years. That's why Interfor became involved in the project.
The second stage of the project involved a study of the watershed, in this case Chameleon, and the actual restoration work. All of this was paid for through stumpage fees collected by the province. Most importantly, the work we are about to show you was done by locals.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. Local people, First Nation people, community group people. We've had First Nation people and community group people on this project from the beginning. And next summer it'll be the same thing. They'll be doing most of the girdling, most of the labor work.
Although Interfor is the current holder of the license in the Chameleon area, a majority of the logging around the creek was done between the 1920s and 50s. A good portion of the damage to the fish habitat was done when the logs were yarded down the channel.
Now this stump that's left here is a good template or a good anchor for us to put new wood next to. Because you can see behind me there's very small conifers and mostly alders. We want to get some of those big conifers back to this size, but it'll be 100 years before they fall in. So we've speeded up the process by adding this wood with the helicopter right next to this old wood that used to be here.
Although you can't see it, there's a 6-foot hole in front of the stump which coho and pinks will move through and then spawn in the tail out. The slower water surrounding the stump and the newer logs anchored to it also provide good habitat for juvenile salmon. A lot of work went into putting these artificial wood structures into place, and a good amount of the pieces were airlifted in. To ensure they do stay in place for the next 20 to 30 years, the structures were anchored in with cables.
What we've done is wrap cables around the logs and go down into the ground into an earth anchor. We've driven an earth anchor into the substrate, and then that will hold the log down. We've also wrapped cables around and used cable clamps here, attached it to the alders on the bank so it can't float up and it can't float away. So that's quite important because it's pretty expensive to build these structures. We want them to function for a long time, so anchoring and cabling is quite important.
There is still some evidence of the damage that was done to Chameleon Creek, which was left untouched as a reminder.
Basically wide and flat. There's no fish habitat here. There's an old flood channel or old road from the 40s. Basically, there was no use of this area by fish because it was high and dry. So what we've done is in the lower 300 meters of this side channel is excavate down into the water table and create ponds and small channels for the juvenile coho to swim up and rear through the winter. That's a key time for coho. They don't want to be in the main stem. It's too fast, the velocity, and there's no food for them. So they come off into these ponds and these side channels where very low velocity, lots of cover for them to hide in. And so we've mimicked that in our excavation downstream of us here.
As we've mentioned already, what you've seen constitutes stages 1 and 2 of the restoration project. There are plans for a third stage of work as well.
The third level of our project will be to improve the stand around the creeks, the riparian zones, riparian management zones, which will bring long-term improvement and establish the creeks, establish the good habitat of the creek as well as a riparian zone along the creeks.
Basically what the riparian work will do, and that will be done next year, we'll remove some of the alder, we'll girdle some, which is basically just killing it, and then we'll underplant with conifers. So we'll just try to get the riparian area back to the condition that it was in before logging.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. In a moving helicopter, the speed of the blades relative to the air depends on the speed of the helicopter as well as the rotational speed. The airspeed of the advancing rotor blade is much higher than that of the helicopter itself. It is possible for this blade to exceed the speed of sound. Let us return to the archives with John Witham.
Papa Whiskey India, Smith's Radio, Roger. Wind 3305, altimeter 2984.
Okay, copy 2984.
John Witham has been flying for most of his adult life. He says he's never really done anything else, and he can't imagine shifting gears now.
It's fun. It's have fun every day, so that's what I like about it. It's enjoyable. You get to see things go places that nobody else would ever dream of going to see.
From mountaintops to river canyons, John goes to the places most people only dream of, places often untouched by man or machine, places you can sometimes only reach by helicopter.
Sort of what the helicopter does most of its day is find little spots to get people close to
there's something they want to look at. So I really don't have a favorite thing. I kind of enjoy everything we do. It's fun. Every day is fun.
Every day is also different. Just ask someone who's worked with John over the last 25 years.
Oh, there is no typical day. They're all different, so I guess that's part of the job appeal.
But there's also a downside. Safety is a constant concern. Weather can be unpredictable, especially here in the Northwest, and terrain difficult.
I probably shouldn't ask this while we're in the air, but are you ever scared?
Oh, yeah, I get worried all the time. But never really scared. If I get scared, I turn around. That should be a rule that everybody follows.
I'm an adventurer, but I'm definitely not a thrill seeker. It's the thrill seekers tend to get weeded out pretty quickly in this industry.
The industry is diverse, from commercial shoots to mineral exploration, forestry to fisheries planning.
We do a lot of this.
To shuttling tourists to glaciers for the view.
Now, you take up a lot of people who've never been up before.
Yeah.
What's it like to watch them going up for the first time?
It's fun. It's a challenge to me to keep them comfortable. Some of them, of course, are a bit nervous. Some people take to it like a duck to water, like you did, for instance. We seem to really enjoy it. Most people, with very few exceptions, once they've been up with you and talked to you and seen what you've done with the helicopter, they feel really, really comfortable and they really enjoy it. It's like riding a cloud or riding a magic carpet.
But even magic carpets have their work cut out for them. Although an experienced pilot, John does make things like silviculture sampling look easy.
Hover up to the tree, and the fellow has the door off and a big pair of shears in his pocket. He goes whack, grabs the sample off the tree, and you fly away.
Landing in little spaces may be more of a challenge, but it's a common practice for forestry workers, and forestry makes up a fair bit of John's business.
This would be used for geochemical sampling or outcrop sampling by geologists generally. Sometimes just getting someone off someplace where it doesn't want to be.
How hard is it to do?
Not very hard at all, actually. It's quite simple to do. Just sort of an exercise that you train to do or you show people to do, and it's not very difficult at all. It's just a matter of getting a skid on the mountain and having the fellow trained to get off very carefully and slowly, close the door without letting a seatbelt into your door. You put the skid down, and the fellow would get out, get his pack out of the back, crouch down, and you'd fly away and pick him up later, hopefully in a much better spot.
For John, there isn't a much better spot than flying high, doing what he loves.
It's like getting a lifelong paid holiday for me. So that's why I like it. I'm not intending to stop anytime soon, that's for sure.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Humans are social beings, and the need to belong is deeply ingrained in our nature. That is why, since the beginning of times, humans have been drawn to creating their own communities. In fact, belonging to a group or community we can identify with helps us develop a stronger sense of personal and collective identity. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to meet some artists from the community.
People with developmental disabilities have not always been included in society. It was only less than 4 years ago when the last large BC institution closed its doors. With the closing of those doors, new ones have opened that have allowed people with developmental disabilities to be part of their community.
A long time ago, a lot of people with developmental disabilities ended up in institutions. And recently, people have been taken out of institutions and been put back into their communities. And they're able to live their own lives and able to get jobs and have families and live lives just like everyone else. So every year we have a celebration, and this year we're celebrating by having a gallery showing and showing the community all of our art and our ability.
Many community members turned out for the opening of the exhibit on October 27th. The show finally came together after months of planning. It was an opportunity for the artists to share a little of themselves with the community.
I have a rug hook and lizard keychain and a drawing of a horse. I like drawing. It's my hobby.
Chris Arnold works with a provincial networking group in Terrace, which helps people with developmental disabilities adjust to the community. Arnold is thrilled that the show is in such a beautiful venue.
It's really neat to have it presented in a venue like this, where everybody can see how varied people's interests are. You know, there's everything from ceramics to painting to drawing to needlework and rug hooking and model trains. Like, there's just about everything. And it's a good reflection of the community, I think. And when we're looking at community living, looking at the art and the hobbies that people with disabilities have, really mirroring what you or I would do in the community.
As a hobby, Dale McKinnon enjoys painting with water-based paints and has several pieces on display.
Well, why I choose them is because of I thought I loved animals, and I thought I have an inspire on animals that I can do them. And actually, my dad had a book that I took it from.
The showcase at the Art Gallery also includes acting on Sundays.
We have some unbelievable talent that some of our clients have overcome insurmountable odds, and they have a wealth of experience to bring to theater. And it's just really nice to have a venue to show others just how awesome they are.
The first time I put the acting on, the first time I started it, I really enjoyed it. And so I started to do more plays and something to do.
What? Taxes. What? Yeah. Pay your taxes, and I'm so much in pain, and you want me to fall?
They tend to really embrace their part, and they are absolutely awesome. I mean, the joy that, you know, emanates from them is what makes the whole experience worthwhile.
Also displayed at the gallery is a celebration quilt that consists of 20 squares, each done by a separate artist. The individual squares reflect the different personalities and interests of each artist. Linda Lacasse assembled the quilt and was moved to add a square of her own.
It's a heart with a house in the middle, and for me it symbolizes what a lot of community living is really about, and it's about people living in the community, not in the institutions. They're welcome in workplaces and in schools and in everywhere. And I'm hoping that someday that people will recognize and look at a person who lives with a disability and see the person first and then the disability second.
Disability is not inability. A person's ability may be different, but still an ability, no matter one's race or age, no matter one's physical or mental condition. We all have limitless possibilities.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.